Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's program presented by Massis Publishing. Before we begin, please stand for a moment of silence for our brothers and sisters in Artsakh. Thank you. Our discussion tonight is led by Professor Ümit Kurt, who will present the Hunchakian Revolutionary Party in Aintab, founders, ideology, and structure. There will be a Q&A after the presentation, so please write your questions on the cards provided by our volunteers. Professor Kurt is a historian of the modern Middle East. His research is on the social, cultural, and economic history of the late Ottoman Empire and early Turkish Republic in the 19th and 20th centuries, with a special focus on the Armenian Genocide and dispossession of Ottoman Armenians at large, imperial interest, ethnic politics, forced migration, and infrastructural transformations. He completed his dissertation in the Department of History at Clark University in 2016. He has then held several postdoctoral positions at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Harvard University and worked as a visiting professor of Armenian Studies at Cal State University, Fresno. Currently, he is an assistant professor of history in the University of Newcastle, Australia. He has also served as a vice executive secretary for the International Network of Genocide Scholars. His recent book, The Armenians of Aintab, has been the recipient of numerous prizes. He is also the author of Antep 1915, Genocide and Perpetrators, and the co-author of The Spirit of the Laws, The Plunder of Wealth in the Armenian Genocide. Please join me in welcoming Professor Kurt. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the generous introduction, and hello everyone. Before getting into my presentation, I just want to make a few remarks about the recent developments in Nagorno-Karabakh. I would like to make this disclaimer, I strongly condemn the Azerbaijani violent and genocidal attacks on Nagorno-Karabakh, heightening the risk of ethnic cleansing against the region's Armenian population, and any attempt to forcibly change the regime demographics is illegal and unacceptable. Thank you. So, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers and the party and the Massis Publishing and for this invitation. I'm really honored and very glad to be here with you. Today the presentation is about the history of Hunchakian Revolutionary Party in Aintab, and I will trace the history of this important party in the city by relying on primary and secondary Armenian sources. So the Social Democratic Hunchakian Party, SDHP, or Hunchakian Party, was one of the very first organized Armenian political parties. Established in Geneva in 1887, its founders, as you know, Avedis Nazarbekyan, Maro Vartanian Nazarbekyan, Gabriel Gafians, Rupen Khanazat, Christopor Ohanyan, and Kevok Kharanjian, were first to adhere to the scientific socialism of the time and try to implement this worldview among the Armenians of the Ottoman Empire. Despite being the first Armenian movement to develop a considerable grassroots organization and to create a large network of underground cells inside the Ottoman Empire, the history of the Hunchakian Party has been inadequately covered by the scholarship on the social and economic life of the late Ottoman empires, Ottoman Armenians. Their official program called for a broad democracy, political freedom, and national independence for Turkish Armenia, the 6 Armenian provinces in eastern Anatolia, known as Western Armenia, as you know, Sivas, Erzurum, Mamerutulaziz, Diyarbakir, Bitlis, and Van. Through revolutionary action, and they denounced the exploitation of man by man and set socialism as the future objective of Armenian people. That was the quote from their party program. The field of activity of the Hunchakian Revolutionary Party was not only limited to Eastern Anatolia or Western Armenia, but also extended to the region of Kilikia. Philippos Sarkisyan and Avedis Shishmanyan, both graduated from Murat Rafaelian in Venice, from Zeytun, were the first and foremost Hunchak members who actively operated in Aintab. Aintab, as you know, situated on the boundaries of Cilicia and Syria, near both the Mediterranean Sea and the Gulf of Alexandrite. It was an important city where the Hunchakian Revolutionary Party took root. In Aintab, a Hunchakian chapter or branch was established at the Central Turkey College, the most important and prestigious Armenian Protestant institution in the city, founded in 1876, having numerous Armenian professors and students. The Aintab branch of the Hunchakian movement had an organizational structure that was controlled by military discipline and order. In a short period of time, and as a result of serious efforts, a massive organization was established that was powerful in terms of both quantity and quality. The Aintab branch of the Hunchakian structure came into prominence in 1890 and 92, and the nationalist Armenian youth of Aintab was, to a great extent, directly involved in this movement or sympathized with the party. The party included representatives of all categories and classes, operating in numerous fields ranging from education, religion, commerce, and artisanship to various other areas. This party was a strong presence, maintaining its well-informed, discreet, and disciplined members. The leadership of the branch was led by Lazaros Efendi Diradurian, who was the head of the Armenian language teachers, and his student Moses Hovsepian. The size of this group was considerable. Within this branch, there were young members from Aintab, Aleppo, Marash, Kesap, Kilis, Talas, Urfa, and other cities. Female founders were also present. Among the first was Rosa Levonian, the wife of Professor Sarkis Levonian from the Central Turkey College. Another one was Esther Keşişyan. Keşişyan was also a teacher at the American Girls College of Aintab. The Hunchakian branch in Aintab was an organization with appeal and credibility, aiming to serve Armenians. Hunchaks were working towards the interests of both individuals and the public in fields such as church, religion, and education. They were closely concerned with people's problems. Through foreign advice and instruction of counterpart political organizations in Europe and Egypt, as well as various indicators, the Hunchakian branch in Aintab was being managed quietly, calmly, and peacefully in a low-key manner. In addition to the Central Turkey College, the Vartanian High School for Boys, founded in 1882, was another headquarters of the Hunchakian Revolutionary Party in the city, which recruited members. The stringent policies of the Sultan Abdülhamid II against the Armenians led the Armenian students in Vartanian school to enroll in the revolutionary movement. Armenian students of the school gathered clandestinely, discussing literature on revolution. At some point, Vartanian became a central meeting point for youth and a heart of revolutionary activities. The principal of the school and its teachers became Hunchak sympathizers. They included Sarkis Samuelian from Marash, who was killed in the 1895 massacres under the reign of Abdülhamid II, Sarkis Turabian, Armanak Nazaradian, and Nazaret Fıstıkçıyan. For example, one of the dexterous intellectuals of the Hunchakians, Sarkis Turabian, who acted as the principal of Vartanian in 19, became the leader of the party in Aintab. Another important Hunchakian figure in Aintab was Vahan Kürkçüyan. Under his leadership, prominent members of the Aintab Armenian community, such as Hrant Sülahyan, Haruçun Ceveciyan, Hagop Hamalyan, and Sahak Sahakyan, joined the party. The Aintab branch of the party played a critical role in helping the Armenian self-defense movement in Zeytun. At the beginning of summer 1895, Agassi, Garabet Der Sarkisyan, who was one of the prominent figures of the Hunchakian movement, arrived in Aintab and started working on self-defense measures. For Soghomon Bastajian, a leading figure in the party in Aintab, Agassi's visit aimed at strengthening the links between the central Hunchakian administration and the local branch, and to receive financial support from Hunchaks for the Giligya region. Therefore, the commitment between local forces and the party was formalized, and largely upon the organization's request, both sides agreed on material and moral support from abroad. A 5-person administrative board was formed, composed by the Nazaret Keçeciyan, Harut Yemeniciyan, Sarkis Turabyan, Hagop Keçeciyan, and Solomon Pastacıyan. Other figures such as Hacik Bilecimyan, Hagop Ohanyan, Artuş Tabakyan, Nerses Kazancıyan, and Hagopcan accompanied Agassi in order to participate in the resistance movement in Zeytun. In the spring of 1895, Gazaros Diraduryan, an Armenian teacher and Hunchak member in Central Turkey College, along with his 5 students, left Aintab to join the resistance movement in Zeytun. In the course of Agassi's visit to Aintab, prominent Armenian apostolic and Protestant notables of the district gathered at Professor Zenop Bezciyan's house. A secret meeting was held with 60 people, led by Garabet Nazaretian, a prominent Armenian tradesman, and the teachers representing the Central Turkey College. With the support of these people of the upper class, a total of 400 Ottoman gold were raised. This amount was handed to the Agassi, who took it with him to Zeytun. As a member of one of the Aintab's most wealthy and distinguishing families, Haruchun Ağa Nazaretian was a respected and beloved figure not only for Armenians, but also for the Turk Muslim community. When Hunchakian delegate Agassi visited Aintab, Haruchun Ağa Nazaretian donated a substantial amount of money along with Sarkis Ağa Sahakyan. Solomon Pastacıyan reported that as members of the Nazaretian family, the brothers Haruchun, Garabet, and Nichogos provided all kinds of material and moral support for the establishment of the party in the city. Pastacıyan was also of the opinion that the Zeytun resistance was neither a show of brigandade nor adventurousness. On the contrary, he described the Armenian resistance in Zeytun as a heroic struggle for self-defense and self-preservation against the imposition of that period's political oppression. In this manner, the 1895 Zeytun resistance was treated as a collective and national movement. According to Pastacıyan, the resistance of Zeytun was a victory gained against the Ottoman administration, and it made a considerable mark upon the European powers. This movement in Zeytun had rather organized character similar to that of Giligya overall. The massacres of November 1895 in Aintab were remembered as Balta Senesi, the year of the axe, as most of the Armenians were killed by blunt instruments, although firearms were also used. The exact number of victims is unknown. According to various records, the approximate number of Armenians killed from November 16 to 19 in Aintab is between 300 and 400. Of the Armenian population of around 16,000 recorded in the 1895 yearbook of Aleppo. Due to the self-defense activities and the efforts of the Hunchakian leadership, casualties were relatively lower in Aintab in comparison to other cities and towns in the region of Giligya. Aintab already had an administrative organization in place. New and young faces were incorporated into this structure. As a result of serious effort, a massive organization that was powerful was established within a short period of time. Within this structure, there were representatives of all categories and classes covered by the organization. Operating in numerous fields including education, religion, commerce, and artisanship and various other areas, this organization was a strong presence, maintaining its well-informed, discreet, and disciplined roots. As to the activities of the Hunchakian Revolutionary Party in Aintab after the Young Turk Revolution of 1908, after Abdülhamid's abolishment of the constitution and the parliament in 1878, a group of reform-oriented political activists called the Young Turks, led by a network of exiles and reformers, established the Committee of Union and Progress in 1889. During the summer of 1908, the CUP convinced the commanders of the Ottoman Third Army in Macedonia to revolt against the Sultan. They threatened to march to Constantinople unless the group's demands were met. As a result, the Sultan announced the restoration of the constitution and established a parliamentary government led by the members of the CUP. More importantly, on July 24th of 1908, civil and religious liberties were guaranteed to all citizens. Shortly after the revolution, new political currents and empire-wide political changes resonated strongly in Aintab. With the declaration of the second constitutional era, Hunchakian Revolutionary Party officially proclaimed itself as a political party in the city. It also had ardent members in various schools, including the college, Atenegan, and Giligya Cemara. In general, Armenians benefited from the constitution more than any other ethnic groups. Newspapers in Armenian language were published freely on all subjects, including articles on political, national, local, ideological, and historical issues. Prior forms of censorship ceased, and the Armenian history and literature came into prominence. Poetry, odes, and dramas on the national past of the Armenians were published and performed. Above all, the critiques of the regime and its officials became possible. Hunchakians also accelerated their publication and cultural activities in the city. Young Armenians were fairly engaged in these activities. Prominent Hunchakians also paid a visit to Aintab. For instance, well-known Hunchak Paramas, Mateusz Sarkisyan, visited Aintab and enlightened party members and the sympathizers about the new principles of the constitutional regime and the protection of these principles. He advised Hunchakian members of the Aintab to organize in any circumstances, since he believed that the CUP would not abide by these principles. Therefore, for Paramas, Armenians should always be alert and armed. Before the massacres that occurred in Adana and its outskirts in April 1909 and that caused the death of over 20,000 Armenians, the general political climate was tense and volatile in Aintab. On April 14, 1909, one of the officials of Aleppo's post office informed the representatives of the Hunchaks and the Armenian Revolutionary Party at the same time about the Adana massacre. Representatives in Aleppo reported the unfortunate incidents that took place in Adana to both party administrators in Aintab and warned them to immediately leave everything aside and to take the precautions in order to prevent the occurrence of similar massacres in the city. When the Armenians of Aintab heard the terrible news of the massacres, they immediately joined their forces and prepared for self-defense. Excitement over the declaration of the constitution and liberty had fully faded, and the political fault lines had come to surface. Along with IRF, Hunchaks used all their efforts to supply weapons and establish in order to put a strong self-defense against potential attack by the Kurdish, Turkoman, and Arab mobs and Circassians. The ideal positions and the sites for self-defense were determined from the residential areas on the west side of the city. The Armenian section of the district was divided into different zones, and each post had a band of fighters were stationed to stand guard day and night. Strategic locations were selected as self-defense positions. Led by Hunchaks, Armenians organized in their assigned position for a week, during which no violent incidents occurred. Nerses Hagopian, a well-known Dashnak, states that soon they received news that Turkish notables were having meetings with some among various groups and discussing preparations for massacres. According to rumors, while some among the Turkish community oppose a possible massacre, others question it. Since Armenians were no longer as defenseless and unorganized as they had been in November 1895, the time for such cheap plundering, looting, and easy slaughtering had now passed. Therefore, no massacre took place in Aintab in 1909. Armenians of the city did not meet the fate of those in Adana and its surrounding. Aintab itself stayed relatively calm. Despite the existence of a fragile ethno-religious coexistence, Armenians of Aintab al-Bayt continued fortifying themselves from a potential onslaught against them. On April 11, 1909, an annual meeting of the Evangelical Union was supposed to be held in the city of Adana. A dozen professors, teachers, and respectable figures from Aintab's Protestant community were supposed to participate in this meeting. Among this group were Professor Sarkis Levonyan, Sarkis Hoca, and Setrak Ekmekciyan as valued professors of the American College, as well as pastors Zamgoçyan, Bedrosyan, Kuyumcuyan, and Hagop Efendi Simciyan. On their way to the city of Adana, they were burnt alive in Osmaniye's Protestant church on April 14, 1909. Among those dead were 26 leaders of 30 different Protestant congregations, pastors, ministers, delegates, professors, including one faculty member of Central Turkey College, namely Professor Sarkis Levonyan. Hagopian cites that following this incident, Turkish leaders of Aintab's gentry stated, quote, "You Armenians, you covered a long distance in modernism. We were not able to follow your lead. We were not able to rise up to your level. So we need to slaughter you every 20, 30 years to make you run with pace," unquote. This speech reflects the resentment and envy Muslim Turks had towards Armenians' overwhelming success in political, social, and economic realms. To that end, it affirms the existence of such a mindset. In mid-April, the Turkish Muluter, who had gone with the Aintab's delegate for Adana, reported that all Armenians were killed in Osmaniye. Having heard of this terrible news, missionary Shepherd wanted to leave for Hasanbeyli in order to help the poor over there, but he was convinced otherwise by his native and foreign friends who insisted him to stay in Aintab since a massacre might occur at any moment in the city too. Aintab was in a critical state. At the end of the school year of Central Turkey College, discovered that the students had formed a secret Armenian Revolutionary Society. Students who had allied with the local Armenian population in Aintab threatened to strike and promote their cause against the local Young Turk authorities. Approximately 200 individuals, almost all apostolic and Protestant Armenians, belonged to that society. President John Merrill was forced to address the issue in a way that will placate growing CUP disturbance with the Armenian institution without ostracizing the local Armenian community. Following a recommendation from the faculty, Merrill closed the college for a period of 6 weeks. When the college reopened, he refused to admit any students who possessed a connection to the society. "We had met our college difficulty firmly and settled it wisely," Merrill wrote to the Board of Trustees after this incident. Because of this, he believed the college at Aintab had been spared further molestation from Constantinople. Had the college been full of young Armenian revolutionaries and the Turks of the city full of suspicions towards us and the Armenians, I do not believe that the local government could have kept order, he said. In Merrill's mind, the college had done all it could to promote order and maintain neutrality between the Armenian Christian population and the Young Turks. The reaction, while firm, did not dispel Turkish suspicion towards the institution. Missionaries in Aintab did not understand, asserts Joseph Grabel, that the existence of the society at Central Turkey, regardless of the schools disciplining it, convinced many Turks of missionary complicity in the Armenian insurrection, unquote. In the meantime, a specific occurrence in Aintab further agitated the Muslim community and escalating inter-ethnic tensions in a way that could have led to a massacre similar to that of Adana. This attempt, however, failed. The event was called Kelleci Olayı, the severed head incident among the people of the city. Given the period and historical context that increased the level of violence against Armenians and led to massacres in Adana and its surrounding areas, it's important to dwell upon this incident. In April, rumors of trouble broke out in Aintab on May 3rd, 1909. A basket holding a severe head was thrown into the lot adjoining the second church in the Armenian quarter, leaving the impression that an Armenian had murdered a Turk. The severe head was unrecognizable. A Turkish woman claimed that she saw a dead body missing its head in a place called Boklubostan, close to the church neighborhood. This name, the same woman cried out, quote, "Infidels killed this Muslim, cut his head off and threw it to the garden," unquote. She ran to the Turkish neighborhood, wailing to break the news. Her cries spread around the whole city. A number of police officers paid a visit to the church and took the severe head to the governor's place, where the deputy governorate and the police headquarters were located. Upon hearing the news, the provoked Turks were filled with anger towards local Armenians. In response, Armenians closed up their shops and withdrew to their houses. As previously decided, all Hunchak and Tashnak youth took their positions and started waiting. Local prefect Ali Kemal Bey demanded the community surrender the murderers. As one of the witnesses of this incident, Nerses Hagopian underlines that the Turks disrupted peace in the city. For what was this Turkish woman who saw the dead body doing there on an early Monday morning? And how did she know that the severe head belonged to a Turk? Armenians posed these questions to the local prefect. However, Ali Kemal insisted that light had already been shed on these questions and that the killer had already admitted to his crime. The Turkish Muslim mob was intent on taking revenge upon Armenians. Meanwhile, an old Muslim woman approached the government palace asking to see the severe head. Upon examining the head closely, it was discovered that one of the teeth in the dead man's mouth was missing. The woman right away recalled that her son had had a tooth removed the previous week and got up from her seat asserting, "This is my son." Her son had been missing for 2 days. This further complicated the situation for this woman, clearly stated that the severe head belonged to her son. The old woman blamed her son-in-law, who was also her son's business associate, for this crime. Police chief and other policemen showed up at his shop and arrested him. It was evident that the severe head came from the son-in-law's house based on the bloodstains found in his shop. Moreover, it was not hard to find the body, which was covered with a thin layer of the earth inside the stable of the brother-in-law's house. The arms and the legs of the dead man were recovered in the Turkish cemetery nearby. Ultimately, the murderer was caught and brought to prison in shackles. Armenians were pleased with this result because they were aware that they had a narrow escape. Yet in any event, self-defense activities of the Hunchaks were well organized in the city against any potential attack. The perpetrator of this incident case was tried in Aleppo. Many Aintab Armenians and Turks were present at the court, known to be the individual who was fond of Armenians, a prominent member of the local elite, Ahmet Ağa, also attended the hearings. At that time, killing someone, the act of murder, was punished by execution. Ahmet Ağa and the Kaymakam, local prefect Ali Kemal Bey, worked tirelessly to discover the truth and to calm the agitated Muslims who had been told that an Armenian had murdered a Muslim. In addition, generally speaking, Muslim inhabitants and administrators of the district, as well as the firm stance of the local CEP rulers, attempt to hinder the likelihood of a new uproar, and these efforts were appreciated by Armenians too. At the time, Ali Kemal used all his power to prevent the outbreak of violence in Aintab. He was later rewarded with a letter of appreciation by Aleppo province for exerting great efforts in maintaining peace and security for the people of the city. Additionally, this Ahmet Ağa made a significant effort in succeeding in having the guilty man hanged in Aintab. The murderer of the severe head case was executed at Arasa Market Square in front of the public view. After the trial and execution, tension between the two communities relatively eased to a degree, economic life resumed, and affairs became somewhat normal. Construction and related businesses started growing with neighborhoods. The district expanded toward the west, making the lands that were once unavailable for residents valuable. Compared to the previous year, there was remarkable improvement in terms of living standards. Therefore, relations between the two groups evolved into a relative state of normality. The next 6 years, following the declaration of the Constitution, was a constructive period of economic, cultural, and educational improvement for Aintab, especially for Armenians. Equality, freedom, and fraternity in the post-revolutionary period also entailed equality in the service of ethnic groups in the army. Armenians had wholeheartedly accepted the principle of enlisting in the Ottoman army. Additionally, the CEP government's decision to make military service mandatory for non-Muslims in 1909 had its repercussions in Aintab. Amongst various positive developments to integrate Armenians into the Ottoman society was the permission to have Armenians join the army enroll in military schools, and rise in rank within the army. For them, military conscription meant reaffirmation of equal rights among the groups. In the aftermath of the Adana massacres, it was evident that IRF's relations with the CUP dwindled. According to Hovhannes Araradian, one of the significant representatives of the IRF in Aintab, after the massacres in Adana, a general air of perpetual distrust ruled all relations between the two parties. The massacre undermined IRF's commitment to the constitutional process, as well as possible alliance between the two. The intimacy of official relations established by initial freedoms of the second constitutional period eventually gave way to insincerity. By 1915, the Hunchakian Revolutionary Party in Aintab was composed of well-organized 28-30 groups. Each group consisted of 7 to 11 members and also included the youth from Atanegan, Giligya Cemaran, and Central Turkey College. And sport unions, the women's clubs, Hunchakian and auditoriums for conferences and lectures. Therefore, Aintab branch was the center for Hunchakian administrators in Urfa, Maraş, Zeytun, Birecik, Antioch, Kesap, and Aleppo. The Aintab's Hunchaks did not have peaceful relations with the Armenian national patriarchate at Constantinople and was always considered as a rival to the diocese. On April 24th of 1915, CUP government sent orders to the local authorities, including Aintab, especially in the light of the recent events in Zeytun, Bitlis, Sivas, and Van. Armenians were to be arrested and kept under supervision throughout the country. By means of such orders, all Tashnak and Hunchak committees and organizations were to be dissolved, their newspapers closed, and their leaders arrested and brought before military tribunals. The entire Hunchak representatives in Aintab were arrested and imprisoned. Most Aintab Hunchakian members who were not imprisoned were sent to work in the labor battalions. Almost everyone who remained in the city was deported to Derzor and the deserts of Syria along with their families. Only 1/3 of the deportees managed to survive and return to city. In the Sykes-Picot Agreement, concluded on May 19, 1916, French and Britain carved up the Arab territories of the former Ottoman Empire into the spheres of influence. Under this agreement, the Syrian coast and the modern-day Lebanon went to France, and Britain would take direct control over central and southern Mesopotamia. Based on the Sykes-Picot and the 7th article of Mondros Armistice on October 1918, British forces occupied Aintab in December of the same year. Primary and most urgent task of the British occupation forces were to facilitate the return of Armenians to their homes, to restitute their properties and assets, and to find and save the Armenian women and children who had been held in Muslim households to their families or relatives. Armenian survivors started to return to their hometowns in December 1918. In late 1918, some Armenians, including those of Aintab, chose to return to Giligya. The Kilis refugees were first to return. In January 1919, other convoys of Armenians from Dörtyol, Mersin, Tarsus, Alexandria, Kırıkhan, Hacin, and Toprakkalı began returning by trains with the help and organization of Armenian National Union in Aleppo. Moreover, the Minister of Interior requested the Minister of War to send some money as mobilization allowance for Aintab Armenians in order to compensate their return expenses. In January 1919, the Allied High Command decided to repatriate all Armenian deportees from camps in Syria and Palestine to their hometowns in Asia Minor. The majority of these survivors were natives of Giligya. Among the deportees concentrated in Aleppo, some 6,000 came from Aintab, 3,000 from Kilis. In early February, the process of repatriation intensified in Aintab. According to statistics provided by Ecumenical and Armenian Patriarchate, early in 1919, there were 430 Armenians who had returned to Aintab. On May 12, 1919, the director of the Central Service of Armenian Repatriation issued an order for the repatriation of Maraş and Aintab refugees. By May 31, 1919, 4,221 Armenians had returned to Aintab. Between January 1st and July 20, 1919, a total of 5,607 Armenian refugees repatriated to city again. The exact number of Aintab Armenians who returned to their homeland is unknown. There are various contradictory figures regarding the number of returnees from both Armenian and Turkish sources. According to Turkish sources, there were approximately 18,000 Muslims and 37 Armenians in Aintab in 1918-1919, and the number of Armenians who returned with the support of British was around 25,000. Based on Armenian sources, overall, 18,000 Armenian survivors managed to return to city by the end of 1919. Additionally, 1,500 Armenians from Sivas, Gürün, and Kayseri, as well as 600 and 700 Armenian orphans from various places came to Aintab. In 1920, these estimations were very important for the Armenian National Union Committee of the city because it used the numbers to calculate the distribution of food rations as equally and economically as possible. Aintab section of Hunchakian Revolutionary Party play a key role in helping Armenians return to Aintab. The British decided to cede the city to the French by signing the Syrian agreement with the French government on September 15, 1919. According to this agreement, the French forces would replace the British in October 1919, a situation which disrupted the restoration process. Local authorities became reluctant to return the Armenian properties to the survivors, even if ordered to do so by the Minister of Interior. Occasionally, houses were returned to their rightful owners, but in most cases, local authorities refused to evict the present occupants. Additionally, the rise of the Kemalist nationalist movement in the city in 1919 and 1920 put a halt to the restitution process. In the face of French occupation, local nationalist Kemalist forces instigated armed struggle against the French. Over the course of Aintab Kemalist War in Aintab, or Aintabı Herasomardı, Aintabı İntabaçüşün, Armenians systematically organized and fought. An administrative body named the National Union was formed with representatives of the three denominations, Orthodox, Protestant, and Catholic Armenians, and three political parties, IRF, SDHP, and Ramgavars, for the purpose of managing the community and its religious affairs. Nerses Tavukçıyan was the president of the National Union. As the supreme authority, the National Union formed a municipal council, police force, central provisions committee, judiciary body, sanitary commission, firefighters group, financial committee, and a group to distribute flyers. The military committee, having come into being 2 months earlier, was under the command of two well-known Hunchaks, Ador Levonyan and Avedis Kalemkeryan. Another famous Hunchak, Hagop Murekyan, undertook an important mission and had a significant place in the National Union. Other members of the National Union included Dashnaks and Ramgavars, along with Hunchaks. In addition, there were 4 Hunchaks constitute the military central board, Avedis Kalemkeryan, Ador Levonyan, Kevork Babayan, and Rupen Yasızyan. Throughout the Kemalist French War in Aintab, which began on April 1st, 1920, and ended with the Kemalist defeat and the city surrendered to the French military forces on February 9th, 1921, the Armenians of Aintab allied with the French. On November 4th, 1921, the French commanders made the official declaration to leave the city to the Turkish authorities, which created an atmosphere of great panic among the Armenians who rely on the French to help them against the much-feared Kemalist forces. On December 25, 1921, when the French forces left Aintab, the departure of Armenians from the city gained momentum. In early December 1921, 8,000 Armenians managed to leave Aintab by their own means. The final French contingents left on January 4, 1922. Yet, despite their victory, the French ultimately decided to retreat from the city in February 1921, leaving it to the Kemalist forces in accordance with the Treaty of Ankara from October 20, 1921. By the complete departure of the Armenians of Aintab from the city in 1922, activities of the Hunchakian Revolutionary Party came to an end, and the Hunchaks spent all their efforts to help Armenians leave the city securely for Aleppo and Beirut. The Aintab branch of the Hunchaks was always an effective and influential political entity with its well-established structure and rank and file in the political, social, and cultural walks of the Armenian life throughout the late 19th and the early 20th century. Even as it went through an internal debate among its founding leaders and the leading figures immediately aftermath of the Hamidian pogroms in 1890s, which culminated the rise of IRF and its political power within the Aintab Armenian community, Hunchaks continued to be a key political actor in the city. For the genocide survivors, it used all its organizational capacity and manpower to facilitate their return to Aintab in 1918 and 1919, and at such critical period of time, never shied away from collaborating with the IRF for that purpose. Thank you so much for your patience. So this is the Armenian Catholic Church, the Franciscan Church in the city. It's being used now at the Atatürk Cultural Center in the city. As you see, this is the military reader Avedis Kalemkerian. And these are the Armenian orphans in 1918-1919 under the leadership of Davidian, and they are standing in front of the Armenian Orthodox Gregorian Church, Surp Aspazatsing Gegetsi. And this is that was the school for Armenian girls seminary established by the missionaries in the city. So that is the panoramic view of the city in late 19th century, Aintab. And that was the Central Turkey College, American College. It was the headquarters of British forces in 1918 and 1919 when the city was under British occupation. And that is the map of Aintab. So that was one of the demolished buildings during the İkna And that was the moment when the British ceded the city to the French forces, and the both cities' local elites and the French and the British commanders were there. You see the exchange of French for the British troops. And these were the Armenian orphans who came from mostly Derzor and also Hama and Humus, and some of them were also rescued from the Muslim households in the city by the British forces, and they were collected in the YMCA building in the city. As you see, this is the YMCA building, and the British and the French occupation forces used that building as one of the headquarters too. So Nerses Tavukçuyan, he was the leader of the Armenian National Union branch of the city. And some Hunchaks, Fedais, members in the city again. So of course there was a strong female participation in the Armenian İkna Aintabı Koyamardı as well. So you see they were digging the tunnels and the trenches, and they were very active. One of them was even holding, a gun. And so that is famous Vresh cannon. And they were all Hunchaks Fedais. And the other members. And the male, mostly teenagers, they were also very actively participating in the resistance movement. Here in the females, in the Armenian neighborhoods. So that was a workshop for making bombs and shells. So it indicates how well organized the resistance movement was. And these were the members of the Hunchaks and also other parties. They were the military forces. And the female. So Vresh, 1920 April. So other Armenian fighters observing. So we're making bombs, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Professor, for the insightful lecture on Aintab. We really appreciate it. I have a few questions here for you from our audience. So, can you tell us a little bit about your background and why do you have a focus on Aintab?
So I was born and grown up in Aintab. Yes, Aintab siyam, Aintab zinazem, am poç indaniki Aintabenen. Mamayız kavme, Kürdem, babayız kavme, Arabem. Kes Arap, kes Kürde. Uramen. So I got interested in the history of Armenians in Aintab, specifically thanks to a particular incident which happened to me when I was in, I just finished my master's degree, and there was a coffee shop which I used to go with my high school mates all the time, Papyrus Cafe, and it was called, and so I happened to learn that that was the house of Kara Nazar Nazaretian and his sons and his family. So we had a very interesting conversation with the current owner of the coffee shop. So because I always went there, but I never got around. So so this time when I met a friend of mine, after having a chat, and so I decided to get around the house because it's a beautiful house. So I start getting around the house, and I was in a big hall, and I saw this beautifully embellished doors and you know other stuff, and also in the ceilings of the room I saw some biblical you know pictures, like frescoes, I would say, and that confused me. And then I came down and decided to talk to the owner. And I asked him, that's a beautiful place, and who had this place before you? He said, yeah, it was from my grandfather. So, and then I said, he must be a very smart guy to keep such a place. And so he said, yes. And then I asked him, but I saw some biblical, you know, stuff in the ceiling. So that has to do with Christianity. So, and he said, don't get into this. When he said, don't get into this, of course, I got into it more. So, and I was quite gregarious. So I asked him again, so who were living here before you guys? So he said, don't ask. I said, please tell me. And he whispered to my ears, and he said, there were Armenians here. I said, I couldn't hear you. He said again, there were Armenians here. I said, I really couldn't hear you. And then he yelled at me, there were Armenians here. And then everybody heard him out in the coffee shop. So, and then I asked him, there were Armenians here. He said, yes. So where are they? Or where were they? He said, they all gone. But the way he expressed this was quite prosaic, very pristine, simple. And then, so there were Armenians, you're telling me there were Armenians here, and then they had this place, and all of a sudden, they just left, and also left the city, and left this place to your grandfather. So this is the story you're telling me, and this is the story you want me to buy. So that evokes, that particular incident evokes my interest to work on what happened to Armenians in the city, but specifically how their wealth and richness change hands. That was the source of my curiosity. My curiosity actually came out of my total ignorance about the history of my hometown. Yeah.
That's amazing. You said Aintab largely escaped the 1909 massacre. Mm-hmm. Was this because it was well-armed and organized? Are there any distinctions from the other areas that fell prey to the massacres? And are there any other details of that specific organization?
It's a very good question, actually. And in my book, The Armenians of Aintab, The Economics of Genocide in an Ottoman Province, published by Harvard University Press in 2021, there is a particular chapter dedicating to this question, exploring why the same massacres did not take place in Aintab, even though it took place in Kilis, which was kind of an adjacent city to Aintab, but it never happened in the city, in Aintab. So we come up with the notion of restraint of violence in the case of Aintab. So why? Why did it so? Why was it so? First of all, as stated in the question, there was a very strong self-defense, also and armament. Why armament? After 1908 revolution, Christians were given right to carry arms, bear arms as well. So Armenians were smart enough to arm, also keep arms, secure arms, hide them, and so forth, because the relations between the CUP and other political parties were so restrained, and the issue of trust was always present. So it was always questioning and suspicious for them. Also, they went through the Hamidian massacres in November 1895 in the city. In the Hamidian massacres, they happened to learn how crucial and significant to have a self-defense mechanisms, and to create self-defense mechanisms in the city. Unfortunately, they had to learn this with such a price, huge price, during the Hamidian period. Also, there are other factors which led to inoccurrence of violence in Aintab in 1909. Was that local prefect of the city? He was a very statesman-minded person. He always wanted to keep peace and stability in the city. I mean, I am not saying that he was pro-Armenian or what. No, he just needed stability and order in the city. That's why he was ready to prevent any kind of attack or risk from destroying or breaking off of the stability in the city. That's why he was welcoming to listen to complaints of Armenians as well. So he was not naive to believe all attacks or provocations coming from the Muslim side. So he had this common sense. And another factor was certain local elites who were neighbors of prominent Armenian families, who were friends of them. And these local elites, they were members of the Aintab CUP club, by the way. There were also Armenians who were members of the Aintab CUP club as well. So they were in the same political party, in the same political movement. That also created a kind of bondage or a space to discuss these kind of issues before getting into action or violent action. These were all dependent and independent variables which led to prevent violence, the same kind of magnitude of violence in the city.
You mentioned that after the Hamidian massacre, there was a shift in focus, and that there was an imperative for the people of Aintab to then organize for their own self-defense. Was that homegrown, or did that maybe come from external sources or external organizing, or was it contained within Aintab?
In the first place, that was homegrown, that's for sure. But also there were supports coming from Aleppo and Beirut and for instance in Bulgaria, in Tbilisi, in Bolis as well. So, but we must really acknowledge the fact that there was a homegrown organizational mechanisms gearing towards the resistance and also creating resistance to any possible attack. Yeah.
Amazing. Can you please explain your methods and or sources for your research? Where do you go to find these images or the source material?
Yeah, very great question. And first of all, I worked and I managed to reach out these sources in Armenian National Archives, Armenian National Library, Azgayin Grataran, and also memoirs, Armenian local sources on not only on Aintab, also on other cities in Gilicia. So Hushamadians also are my major sources, always. But I did read numerous Armenian memoirs authored by natives of the city. I exploited a lot these sources. I use a lot these sources. But of course, I also compare the information given in these sources with the other primary and secondary archival materials or the secondary literature. So that's why I use sources in Nubarian Library. I worked there a great deal of time in Nubarian Library based in Paris. And I also use the archives in Antalya, in Beirut. So and I use Ottoman sources, Ottoman archival materials, which are located in the prime ministerial archives in Istanbul. And last but not least, I worked a lot in local libraries in Aintab, in Gaziantep, present-day Gaziantep. I used all these books, local history books, written by these Aintab elites, Aintab dignitaries. Most of them plundered Armenian properties, and they became rich by acquiring these properties. And most of the authors of these books, they were also involved in their self-defense during the French occupation. So that's why they were kind of primary witness of all these incidents. I also, of course, the discourse and the rhetoric and the information in the book was very official, history-oriented. But within the lines, you can get a great deal of information, very valuable information from these sources as well. Yeah.
You mentioned that the SDHP has been inadequately covered in academia. Do you have any insight or opinions as to why?
I think now this presentation of mine actually is going to be published as a book chapter in a forthcoming edited volume, edited by Professor Bedros Dermatosyan. So the book is about the history of the Hunchakian Revolutionary Party. It's the first and the most all-inclusive, encompassing and comprehensive historical work on the subject matter, and the book will be out in November and published by Bloomsbury.
Thanks for the plug. Appreciate that.
Pleasure. So, I think one of the most, maybe the most significant hurdle to not have sufficient works done on history of Hunchakian Revolutionary Party is that the scholars are deprived of certain language skills. So, because you cannot write the history of Hunchakians or history of Tashnaks or Ramgavars without utilizing Armenian sources. So, and most of the historians in our field, are lack of this Armenian language abilities. But I think situation has been worse in the past, but now there's a growing and flourishing. Actually, now there are new scholars learning Armenian, reading Armenian properly and adequately, and using these sources more and more. So I'm extremely optimistic about the future research and so forth in the field in that sense.
Very happy to hear that. How long did it take you to learn Armenian? Did it come easy?
No, it wasn't at all. It wasn't at all. I think I lived in Jerusalem for 5 years in Israel. I pick up Hebrew like 1.5 years right away. But Armenian, I think it's the most difficult language which I managed to learn. I'm still learning anyway. So first I start in Boğaziçi University in Bolis. So I took a free elective course. By the way, in 2009, for the first time in Turkey, Armenian language became an elective course in a Turkish Hamalsarani, in a Turkish university. So I took that course from an Armenian tutor, Armenian teacher. And then I start my PhD in 2010 at Clark. So I met a priest, Armenian priest from Worcester. So we used to meet 2 days in a week in Dunkin' Donuts, and he was teaching me Armenian, and I was teaching him some Kurdish. So that helped a lot. And then I ended up in Venice to join this intensive summer course organized by High-Levon Bogosekian. So it was an amazing 3 weeks, 4 weeks intensive Armenian course. Also, I became acquainted with the Armenian culture as well over there. And then I moved to Watertown in Boston, and I started attending the St. James Church every day, going there every Sunday. And there was an Armenian language course in the church as well, so I was participating. And the average of my classmates were 75. So, so that was it. But I dedicated like 2 years of my life to be able to learn this language properly and scholarly. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you. You have to, otherwise you can, I mean, if you are writing a history of not only victim groups, but also a group of people, you are writing a history of a group of people, I mean, how are you going to be able to write without using their own, without hearing their own voices? So in order to hear their voices, I need to hear from their own sources, their own, books, not only books, also, oral histories and everything.
Fascinating. I couldn't agree with you more. You mentioned that the British, when they were in control of Aintab, they went in and saved Armenian orphans from Muslim homes. Yeah. Do we have any idea of how that process worked? How did the British know, for example, to go into this particular home because there was an orphan there?
Wonderful question. It was a very, very difficult process for the British. And you know what? Actually, many children and many widows, many female teenagers especially, who were forced to get married to Muslim women and who were kept forcibly in the Muslim households, they were not found. Because they didn't even know that the city was under British occupation. They were not aware of anything going on the ground. They still, thought, okay, these people deported our families. We were, under their authority, and we were forced to do this. So it's okay. It's Jagadakir. What can we do? They were not aware of what was going on. But local, again, the British got a lot of help from the Armenian National Union. So the Armenians themselves organized. They knew the names, they knew the families, they knew the locations, they could easily pinpoint. So of course the British, they kind of, at some point, they went and rang the bell of each and every, household to be able to find out these children, these female teenagers, Armenian widows, and so forth. It was extremely a difficult process. When the French came, they accelerated this process, by the way. And by the way, the British forces were not only looking for Armenian orphans or the children, they were also looking for the perpetrators to take them under custody, to arrest them, and then to send them to Aleppo force, and then Egypt. They kept them over there, and most of them were sent to Malta later in exile.
Were these orders, I assume, from the British Army, did they come from London straight away, or how was that process?
No, government in Istanbul during the armistice period, they were working closely and cooperatively with the occupation forces because they had to. And also the CUP members, this Enver Talat Cemal and other infamous members, they already escaped the country. So the CUP were condemned in the Ottoman Empire at that time. So the new government, even the Italian and Russian, for all occupation forces. So they had to give this information to them, you know. So imagine a city under occupation. So, you know, but the rise of Kemalist movement in Ankara and also in other cities in Anatolia also stopped this process too.
So it was very much an internal project.
Yeah.
It didn't come from, you know, Europe, the directive, let's say.
The directive, also the Armenian, you know, religious and political leaders, Hunchaks, Tashnaks, Ramgavars, they were also forcing these occupation forces first give their properties back to their original owners, arrest these culprits, these war criminals, and also put them on trial because of the crimes they committed against humanity. And there was also Armenian Patriarchate in Bolis. They were extremely active. Zavender Deryagayan, he was extremely active to push and pressure British, Italian, also other occupation forces to find these children, to, you know, start the restitution process and everything. Yeah. As a combination of all forces and actors, I would say.
In that same theme, how far did the National Union's power stretch? Was it only in Aintab or other areas?
Excellent question. No, it was stretching to others. Think about a small Armenian National Union in each and every Armenian city, especially in Giligia, because I only look at Giligia. So it was in Marash, it was in Adana, it was in Urfa, it was in Pozantı, it was in Dörtyol, Osmaniye. But the headquarters, they were already organized and established in Port Said, you know, in Egypt. And then also there were Armenian, Légion d'Orient forces. They joined the French army later during the French occupation of the city. So all these organizations already started their activities immediately aftermath of the armistice of Mondros. So in late October 1918, I would say.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We have a question here. So the CUP was established in 1889, the SDHP in 87, the ARF in 1890. Do you see any coincidence and or correlation that these parties were established so close in time to each other?
Of course. It's a good point. Please do not forget, these three political organizations, they became political parties later. They all agreed upon one point when they were founded, to topple the Abdülhamid, to finish him off. It was the common enemy, and all opposition forces, like all these three parties, they ended up in Paris, in Geneva, in Egypt. They organized conferences, they discussed all issues, matters together, and they were trying to find a way to overthrow Abdülhamid and his government. But also there were also discussions and debates among them, for instance, Hunchaks were always questioning CUP's position towards the Armenian massacres in 1985. So what is your response to that? What are you going to do that when we overthrow Abdülhamid? You know, can you give us a guarantee that these massacres will never happen again? Stuff like that. All these internal discussions were also taking place among them. But why? Yeah, in 1889, 1890, 91, yes, it had to do with the Hamidian authoritarian dictatorialship of Hamidian regime, so they organized as such against him.
Were the Hunchakian policies focused solely on Armenians, at least in your research?
Mostly Hunchakian activities, because the Hunchakian activities on the Western Armenia, I think it's rather obvious, but the activities of Hunchaks in Giligia region, it has been quite understudied. This is my observation. That's why I decided to focus on their activities in Aintab. Aintab also can be regarded as a model for other cities in Kilikya, in the whole Kilikya region, because the organizational network and the web of network and the dynamics of the organization as such within the party was quite similar in other cities too. And they were also well connected to one another. Yeah, communication was amazing among them, you know, in the incipient years of the party. But also another, I was struck by reading the domars of the parties, you know, the internal reports of the parties when they left Aintab, for instance. There were heated discussions among them. And it was like the Pandora's box was open for them, and they were like insults, they were fights, very heated debates also happened within the, not only the IRF, within the Hunchaks as well. So they were like, where did we make a mistake?
Regarding the genocide.
Genocide and aftermath. Because they were forced to leave the city in 1922. So, and they never trusted French, because French was trying to convince them to stay, but they didn't stay. But they were also, so aftermath, they were questioning what was wrong. You know, we resisted, we fought, but again, we are going through the same fate. Stuff. So there was a self-criticism as well within the party.
You mentioned that the communication internally was amazing.
Yeah.
Was this mostly letter-based, telegrams, or meeting note minutes?
Yeah, telegrams mostly, but also there was always a liaison, and this liaison paid visits to each and every city and asked, what do you need? How about the armed procurement? How about the food? How about the resistance? How about the political situation? How about the cultural activities and so forth? So always this checking, controlling, also observing the shortcomings. Learn great deal from the way the Hunchaks organized in those schools, for instance. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Were the Nazaretian Jebejian houses damaged during the recent earthquake?
No, there are other Armenian houses which have been damaged greatly, but not Jebejians and Karamanukyan's or Nazaretians. No.
Thank you. And last but not least, we can't leave without asking you whether your research, your interests, your academic pursuits and interests have, led to some external pressure, either by, the Turkish government or other organizations, and if so, can you please give us some insight as to kind of what drives you? Why are you so passionate in this area?
Interesting question.
You don't have to answer, by the way.
No, I can answer. It's not a difficult question, but my response might sound interesting to you. So I start my PhD in 2010, and then my research kicked off in 2013, 14. So from 2010, 11 through 2014, I always paid my family a visit twice in a year. I spent like weeks in Aintab. I used to go to Papyrus Cafe all the time, and the guy knew what I was doing. And up until that time, and also afterwards, until 2019, 18, 19, 2020 as well, I always wrote about violence. I wrote about genocide and the Hamidian massacres, how the massacres, were executed in the city in 1915 and afterwards, and also I wrote articles, scholarly articles on the Hamidian massacres. I gave interviews and spoke in Turkish about the only violent aspect of this whole, story. of course, there were reactions, like I was already in the blacklist of the Turkish government. That was okay. But I had never any hardship in the Ottoman archives, for instance. I worked comfortably. Even though I wasn't able to reach out the documents I wanted, but, you know, I wasn't threatened. But in Antep, in Aintab too, they knew I was a bad guy, but I was harmless in their eyes. You know, okay, he wrote about this violence and this thing, okay, he was harmless. So I could go to I could stop by Papyrus Cafe all the time when I was there, because I was also taking picture of the Armenian houses, trying to pinpoint every single location in order to figure out who was the original owner, second owner, third owner, and the present owner. The whole trajectory of each and every property in the whole Armenian quarter of the city, I was trying to pinpoint. But that process came to a halt in 2021. Once my book was out, and once I start talking about property issue, when I wrote about the property confiscation, plunder, expropriation, giving names, giving locations, you know, I was giving the name of the present past owner and the present owner. And then I was stupid enough to give interviews about the book in Turkish too. So they happened to read it, they happened to become aware of it, and then the lynching campaign started. Before that, in their eyes, I was harmless. But when I start about property issue, and then I really, really felt threatened for the first time over the course of this almost a decade research. For the first time, I felt terrified, I felt threatened, because once the book published, I visited my family, and then I came by Papyrus Cafe, again, Nazaretian's house, Karanazar's house. But I was kind of hesitant. I didn't want to go. I was reluctant. But my friend forced me to meet over there. And I accepted. He was an American friend, by the way. I went there, and always I wear a hat. I always grown up my beard all the time, and to keep my profile as low as possible. And then once I set my foot into the building, I could see you could have seen the eyes, you know. The owner, the same guy, you know, who was always mocking with me, having fun with me, joking with me, he gave me a look. And then this look turned into giving an attitude, okay? And he made me feel that I wasn't wanted here. I felt that for the first time.
Terrible.
Yeah. But also that, you know, when you see the flip side of it, it also corroborates what I have done is good, you know, it's right. I did the good. I did the right. I did the good. I did the right work. I did the good work. So that's why that also made me believe that, because I always had this question mark: am I really putting the whole blame on these guys? Maybe I'm missing something. You know, I always in the back of my mind I had this kind of suspicions and so forth. But they all gone away thanks to their reaction.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kurt. This has been an absolutely fascinating lecture. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so
and
much.
And we hope to see you
listening.
again soon.
Hopefully.
Hopefully in the near future for some more insightful information in Giligya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci. Thank you.
Thank you so much.